Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Daniel chapter 3. This is a very famous chapter, very famous story. I'm sure you've all encountered this once or twice before. Nebuchadnezzar builds an image, and he commands that everyone needs to worship it. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not bow down. And because of that, Nebuchadnezzar is in a rage and angry with them. And we're going to pick up this story in verse 14 of chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do you not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if you be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if you worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. These men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said unto the king, True, O king. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men, loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth from the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose body the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of the fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants that trusted in him. And they have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they may not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, that every people, nation, and language, which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. And the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. This chapter shows a great deliverance by the Lord for those servants who refused to bow down at the command of Nebuchadnezzar and worship an idol, which they knew was forbidden by God. The point that struck me as I was rereading this was when Nebuchadnezzar talked about the 3 men who were bound in the midst of the fire, and then finding the 4th in there. The way he describes it in verse 25, he says, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. And I thought about this, and it occurred to me that Nebuchadnezzar could see the fourth man in the fire, but it never indicates to us that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego saw the fourth man in the fire. Perhaps they did, but perhaps they didn't. And if they didn't, it reminded me a lot of many times when we go through trials. When we stand for godly principles, we will get tested in this world. And some of the tests can be very severe. And sometimes it can feel as if we are isolated, threatened, and in some cases, even have our lives put on the line. When these men were pushed into the fiery furnace, they realized that they were not being hurt there. They realized that those things that had bound them, the ropes, burned away, and they were freed in the fire. And what was meant to destroy them actually helped to make them freer. And we will learn those things in fiery trials as well, that the things that the enemy or the world puts in our path to destroy us, God many times uses them to build us up in our faith and to free us from old things that did bind us. But if they couldn't see the fourth man in the fire, it would be very similar to sometimes when I know I go through trials. Sometimes in those difficult periods, we don't feel God's presence with us. We can feel very much alone in the midst of a trial. And if they didn't see him, they may have been wondering at how they were surviving under those harsh circumstances, not understanding how close God really was to them. But the outsider could see the work of God in their life, could see the presence of God there. And I think how true with us when we go through a trial in faith, when we hold on to our principles, when we won't let go of God or the things of God. There is a strong testimony that goes out in the world, and people will look at us and many times, maybe for the first time in our lives, see Christ and his power operating within us. That they see the fourth man in the midst of the fire. God is always with us, whether we perceive him or not. The word says that he will never leave us nor forsake us. My reminder to you is that if you're in the midst of the fire and you don't see God or you don't feel his presence, be assured that he's in there with you and he will bring you through the trial and he'll bring you through better than when you went in. And understand that this may be the best time in your life for you to shine for Christ. That as you walk through this difficulty in faith, that the world will see that there really is a God in heaven and he cares for his people. Have a great day, guys. Bye.